as I sat and listened to the beginning of this debate, my heart simply broke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in strong support of my bill, H.R. 4922, the D.C. Crimes Act. Rather than prioritizing the safety of law-abiding and protecting the lives of innocent residents and visitors, district officials have actively facilitated dysfunction and chaos through their progressive soft-on-crime policies. Instead of addressing the clear epidemic of youth crime in the city, the D.C. City Council increased the age of youth offenders to individuals 24 years old and younger, meaning fully grown legal adults in the District of Columbia can receive sentences meant for children. This is simply insane, and that is why I introduced the D.C. Crimes Act, which lowers the definition of youth from under the age of 25 to under the age of 18, removes the ability of judges to sentence youth offenders below mandatory minimum guidelines, and requires the D.C. Attorney General to establish a public website containing much-needed statistics on juvenile crime in D.C. The Trump administration's efforts have shown that lawlessness is a choice, and it is time for Congress to step up, adhere to our constitutional duty, and firmly address crime in the nation's capital.
Many people know me for being able to do alliterations, and all I could think about was amnesia allows adolescent accountability avoidance agility from across the aisle. So work with me for a second. Imagine being a young man born to Jamaican and Panamanian parents who messed up not once, but twice. Imagine standing in front of a judge with your whole future hanging in the balance, and instead of prison, you are given a promise of mercy. Your record gets wiped clean. You get a second chance at life. Now imagine taking that promise and turning it into promotion. You go to college, you get a job, and even become a member of Congress. That's what redemption looks like. That's what America is supposed to be about. And that is exactly the story of the next wannabe governor from Florida. As a young man, he went through pretrial diversion for misdemeanor marijuana possession. As an adult, yet younger than 24, he was charged with and ultimately placed on probation for felony bribery charges, which ultimately were 2 expunged. He was given a third chance, and now he's the face of a bill that would not afford young people in Washington, D.C. the same opportunities afforded to him. Let me be real. If he had grown up under Donald Trump's America or under the very D.C. crime bill he's pushing today, he wouldn't be standing here as a member of Congress. He'd still be living with the weight of those charges. So let's call this what it is, opportunities for me, but not for thee. He climbed the ladder of redemption, and now he's yanking it right up from the D.C. youth. See, most of us were taught to lift as you climb, but clearly some have forgotten to lift as they climb, and now they are committed to telling the next generation to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. I will not sit quiet while a man who was saved by grace turns around and tries to snatch grace away from others. If we're going to be real about crime, about communities,
lady's time has expired.
I'd like to yield for an additional minute, please.
Gentlewoman is recognized.
About second chances and even third chances, then it needs to start with us looking in the mirror and remembering that even the author of this bill has a story too before he tries to lecture D.C. on safety. And it would be complete hypocrisy to have, hypothetically, someone convicted of 34 felonies to lecture D.C. on what to do with youthful offenders who have been scientifically shown not to have fully developed brains under the age of 25, especially if said multi-count convicted felon was in his 70s when he was convicted. What would be his excuse? Because his brain would be fully developed, and with that, I will yield back.
Earlier today, one of our colleagues, a gentleman from Florida, presented up on this screen something that appeared to be a screenshot of a text message containing or insinuating an explosive allegation.
Jim Biden says, this can work, you need a safe harbor. I can work with your father alone. It'll probably take several months and everybody can read the text. Ms. O'Connor, Mr. Dubinsky, if you saw a text message like this between the president's brother and the president's son, wouldn't you be concerned about them trying to give plausible deniability for the president of the United States to not have any knowledge of said business dealings?
It's worth
Gentleman's time's expired, but please answer the question.
it's worth investigating.
That screenshot of what appeared to be a text message was a fabricated image. It was a fabricated image. I don't know where it came from. I don't know if it was the staff of the committee, but it was not the actual direct screenshot from that phone. And in fact, I would like to submit to the committee the actual full context from the Ziegler Affidavit number 1, Exhibit 402, of the full text of that exchange. Do I have permission from the chair? Importantly, what was brought out from that fabricated image excluded critical context that changed the underlying meaning and allegation that was presented up on that screen by this committee and by members of this committee.
Mr. Lander, I have to come to you. You're the comptroller of the city of New York. You talked about the proposal by Mr. Mamdani for government-run grocery stores. Do you think that's a viable proposal for the people of the city of New York?
All around the country, there are quite a few places where there are publicly owned grocery stores designed to offer healthy, nutritious, affordable food in food deserts where people have no other options. That is
Mr.
working
Lander,
in red and blue states around the country.
Mr. Lander, you do realize that these grocery stores have less product available. The food is not nearly as good. Some of them shut down. The standards in them are, quite frankly, disgusting. Do you think it's in the interest of the people of New York to open this up? And by the way, I'm from Brooklyn, New York, so I've grown up in the city.
I'm so glad to hear it. But if you grew up in low-income neighborhoods in Brooklyn,
Sir, I
you would
grew
see
up
that
in Crown
you
Heights,
had.
Brooklyn, a low-income neighborhood.
Then you would have seen that many of the privately owned stores nearby had low quality and high prices.
Out of the business of distributing food when I was a kid. The city of New York used to distribute food. They got out of that business. They did when I was a kid.
But we still provide a whole lot of free meals in our summer camp programs, in our after-school programs, and in our schools that an enormous number of low-income and working-class families rely on. That is government-distributed food. Should we cut it off?
Last question for you. Can you condemn the phrase global intifada?
I made real clear, if you mean I don't think people should say it, I
condemn
condemn it. If you want to make it against the law and send people to jail for saying it,
Gentleman's time
I
has
don't.
expired.
This is why the city of New York is going down the toilet. I yield.
it's doing great. Thank you. You should come back and
Time has
visit.
expired. Thank you. Now, the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Stile, who chairs our Digital Assets, Financial Technology, and AI Subcommittee, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chairman Hill, and thank you for holding today's hearing. This is a really important topic that we need to discuss, but it tells you a lot about the state of the Democratic Party, where their witness has to come and defend government-run grocery stores. It tells you a lot about the state of the Democratic Party.
Nobody over there should take anything we say so personally, as if we're attacking them. No, we're attacking a process. We're not attacking people here. And I think it's really important. We need to stand up against this. Fascist takeover, that's not a bad word. It's a fact. And here in DC and across the country, it is so incredibly important, Mr. Chair, that this committee does not allow rhetoric that defames or paints Washington, D.C. in a way that you all haven't really truly seen. You're just reading it. No, you're just reading it or something off of some.
Will the gentlelady yield to a question?
Yeah, I think it's really important.
Will the gentlelady yield?
No, I don't yield. I don't even have time. I can tell you.
Your time's expired.
It is expired, but
Mr.
Mr. Chair,
Nice.
but you all live
like
here,
Mr.
and
Lee.
you're not telling people the beautiful parts that you do see in our
Mr.
nation's
Lee.
capital. And no, it's just wrong how we're doing it.
Chairman, I think
Wrong.
it's insane that the
But you're
gentlelady
gonna
doesn't
look
have
at
an
the
argument, but she's going to
Washington, D.C. as a
refer
bunch
to
of
me and some of
criminals.
my
You yield to
colleagues.
Mr.
Mr. Chair,
Donalds.
We were
you
from the
know
Third
this.
Reich. This is
You're
insane.
gonna look at
It's
14,
insane.
15-year-olds as
It's
a bunch of
insane.
criminals?
It's insane.
Oh,
Do I look like a
please,
member of the Third
Donald.
Reich to you, Ms.
Please,
Tlaib?
please,
Is that what I look like to
please.
you?
You're the one taking your voting
Is that what
card,
you think?
giving it
Is that
to
what you
somebody,
think?
giving
Is
it
that
to
what you
Crockett.
think?
No, that's unethical.
I think it's radical and I think
should-
it's
no, you
insane.
should
And
be
I'll
held
respect everything that you say.
accountable. Before you
But to
open your
say
mouth,
something like
you
that
should be
to
held
myself and a lot of my
accountable.
colleagues is way out of line.
I'm not the
It's
one
way out of
giving
line.
my voting
It's
card
way out of
to
line.
someone
Regular
to
order,
go
Mr.
vote.
Way out of
You
line.
don't wanna vote.
Regular order.
That's okay. But it's okay, right?
That is not how it
It's
goes.
okay, right?
You hold yourself accountable before you talk about
Hold
Washington,
myself
D.C.
accountable.
Keep Washington, D.C.
Hold your
out
own
of your
self
mouth.
accountable. How
Keep
about
it out
that?
of your mouth.
Hold your own
I'm
self
trying,
accountable.
Mr.
How about
Bonet.
that?
Free D.C. and make sure you
All right.
vote with your own voting voting card. Don't be giving it to
Ms.
somebody else.
Tlaib, all right, time. Chair recognizes Ms. Boebert from Colorado. Order. Wait a minute, Ms. Boebert. All right. Order. Ms. Boebert.
Throughout this work, one thing has been made abundantly clear. The progressive policies of the District of Columbia City Council are simply not working. We cannot allow further pro-crime policies to be put into place while this crisis continues. Citizens of D.C. and the visitors of our nation's capital deserve to feel safe. This bill is a great step towards ensuring our capital city is going to be safe. I encourage my colleagues to join me in supporting this legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time.
If the gentleman from Florida can actually immediately make everyone safe, he should not only be Donald Trump's running mate, as I keep hearing about, he should be the mayor of the District of Columbia. Amazingly, the gentleman proposes this naked power grab against Washington, denying them the crime-fighting tools they need, despite the fact that they've done a good job and total crime in D.C. is down 16% in 2024 compared to the same period last year, which was conceded by the Republicans in the Rules Committee yesterday. There's been a 26% reduction in violent crime in 2024, which they conceded in the Rules Committee yesterday, and a 22% reduction in homicides. In other words, local democracy works. Let the local governments respond to the problems they're having. But our colleagues insist that crime is still spiking in D.C., despite the evidence to the contrary. So what is their big, tough-on-crime solution? The bold solution they offer us to combat crime in the nation's capital is to prohibit the D.C. Council from ever increasing any criminal penalties and blocking the D.C. Council from ever creating any new crimes. And if that's not what they intend to do, then I think they need to go back and try again. I want to start by humbly suggesting that the majority needs someone new working on legislative acronyms for these messaging bills. This is the DC Crimes Act, which stands for the DC Reforms to Immediately Make Everyone Safe Act of 2024. Immediately make everyone safe. That doesn't sound like legislation. It sounds like a Penn and Teller magic trick to me. The Immediately Make Everyone Safe Act is the fourth bill the majority has now brought to the floor to vilify, heckle, and micromanage the elected mayor and council of the District of Columbia on the appalling conceit that the distinguished members of the Republican conference from Florida or Kentucky or Arizona care more about public safety and public welfare in Washington, D.C. than do the 700,000 people who live there and their elected officials on the D.C. Council and the mayor. But this one is even more sweeping and radical than the prior bills. It doesn't simply overturn one specific current D.C. law. It permanently strips D.C. of authority over any of its criminal laws, making this legislation, perhaps inadvertently, I concede, the largest proposed rollback of D.C.'s authority to govern itself in nearly 30 years. Now, our colleagues may be shocked to learn during this debate what exactly it is they're being asked to vote for today. At the Rules Committee meeting yesterday, I asked the Republican members whether they understood what this bill actually does if you take the time to read the language. None of them seemed to know. So let me explain. The bill amends the D.C. Home Rule Act to say that the D.C. Council may not, quote, enact any act, resolution, or rule to change any criminal sentence in effect on the date of the enactment of the D.C. Crimes Act of 2024. In other words, if this bill becomes law, the D.C. Council could never increase criminal penalties again without Congress acting first, nor could it create any new criminal offenses at all. That is their big tough-on-crime package they offer the Congress. No increases in criminal sentences indefinitely in the District of Columbia, and no new offenses can be passed at all. Say the D.C. Council wanted to create a new criminal offense for, say, directing an organized retail theft ring. Well, Mr. Donalds' bill would prevent them from doing it. Say D.C. wanted to make it a crime to possess a firearm with a removed or altered or mutilated serial number under Mr. Donalds' bill, they would be barred from doing so. But in fact, that's precisely what D.C. just did a few months ago. My Republican colleagues seem blissfully oblivious to the fact that earlier this year, responding to the spike in crime occurring across America, not just in Washington, D.C., of course, the D.C. Council passed a 63-page law called the Secure D.C. Omnibus Act of 2024, which dramatically increased criminal penalties for 9 different crimes and created 6 new criminal offenses. The D.C. bill, which was passed unanimously by the council and signed into law by the mayor, does what Republicans have so eloquently been orating about on the floor. It increased criminal penalties, including for gun crimes, violence in parks, violence committed against vulnerable people, violence committed against rideshare drivers, metro drivers, and transit workers. The Secure D.C. Act also created a host of new offenses, including directing a retail theft ring, strangulation, firing bullets in public, possessing a firearm with a removed or altered serial number, and unlawful discarding of firearms or ammunition. They addressed the actual problems that they're experiencing in their city, something our colleagues seriously know nothing about and don't care about. But if Mr. Donalds' bill had actually been law at the time, the D.C. Council would have been barred from enacting all of these tough-on-crime penalties altogether. And they will be barred in the future from responding to the kinds of spikes in crime that they experience. For my Republican colleagues who love to castigate the people of D.C., who I concede voted more than 90% against Donald Trump in the last election, I would respectfully suggest that they consider the following fact. D.C. has higher maximum criminal penalties than many Republican states do. Let's compare. The maximum penalty for armed robbery in D.C. is 30 years. In Kentucky, represented by the chairman of the Oversight Committee, the maximum is 20 years, 50% less. In North Dakota, it is 10 years or 66% less. In D.C., criminals can receive a 40-year sentence for armed carjacking. In Kentucky, represented by the chairman of the Oversight Committee, carjacking is not a separate independent offense. You've got to charge somebody with armed robbery, but even then, you can only get half the sentence you can get in D.C. for carjacking. Look, despite all of the fine election year rhetoric we've heard, there's something profoundly antithetical to our system of government in what the gentleman is proposing. If you read the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson set forth a bill of particulars against King George and the Parliament. And one of the central allegations of it was that they were denying the colonists the right to define criminal offenses for themselves. People over in England were dictating to people in our country what the criminal offenses should be. And that's like, with all due respect, the gentleman from Florida dictating the people in Washington, D.C., how they should order their affairs when it comes to the criminal law. Jefferson would have understood very well this situation that we're in, and our friends in Washington, 713,000 tax-paying, draftable U.S. citizens have petitioned for statehood because they no longer want to be kicked around by other people's representatives. They want to have an equal say in this body, an equal say in the U.S. Senate, and they don't want other people's representatives telling them that they can't pass the criminal offenses or the increased criminal sentences that they want for their crimes. I'll reserve. Thank you. Why are we here, colleagues? Well, between January of 2017 and January of 2021, we suffered the most lawless presidency of our lifetime. It began by Donald Trump saying that he would keep his more than 500 businesses going. That's right, and he wouldn't divest himself of any of those businesses, and he would not adopt a rule in honor of the Emoluments Clause, consistent with the Emoluments Clause, declining to take money from Saudi Arabia, China, United Arab Emirates, and so on. And then he proceeded, as we've learned, to collect at least $7.8 million from foreign governments, and that's actually a tiny fraction of what he got, because that was only for the first 2 years before the chairman, in his wisdom, decided to tell Mazars to stop complying with the judicial court order. And so that was all we got, was 2 years for 4 businesses out of more than 500. And that was just for 20 countries out of 195 countries on earth. But the lawlessness lasted up until yesterday, when Donald Trump's lawyer got up before the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals and asserted that President Trump, or any other president for that matter, has a right to order assassinations of his political opponents and not be prosecuted for it unless he's impeached and convicted first, which is completely at odds with the text of the Constitution, the history of the Constitution. But he asserted a right to assassinate other citizens unless first he's impeached or convicted, which means all you got to do is kill your political opponents and then kill enough of your political opponents in the House and Senate to keep yourself from being impeached or convicted. My friends, please don't look at your phones and papers right now. This goes to the heart of the republic. Take a position on it. Even if you're going to support it, take a position on it. Don't stick your heads in the sand. Donald Trump is doing this to our country. He's asserting the right of the president to murder people and not be prosecuted for it. Well, so why are we here? Well, Donald Trump insisted to numerous Republicans and in public and on Twitter and on Truth Social that Joe Biden be impeached. Why? Well, because Donald Trump was impeached twice. The last time for inciting a violent insurrection against his own vice president, against the Congress of the United States to overthrow an election. And if you don't believe that, you've got to tell me that if Mike Pence had buckled under to weeks and months of pressure, that Donald Trump would have said, oh no, I was just kidding. I'm not actually going to seize the presidency. Come on, if you believe that, you're too innocent to be let out of the house by yourself. So anyway, Donald Trump says, I don't want to be the only one running for president who's been impeached. Impeach Joe Biden. Figure out something. We were here for a year. You guys did not lay a glove on Joe Biden. You don't have a single credible piece of evidence, not one iota, showing any crime by Joe Biden. As Mr. Lynch says, even your own witnesses came up and said they didn't see it at the one hearing that you had on impeachment. So why are we here? Well, we can't go after Joe Biden. He's clean. Let's go after Hunter Biden. Let's go get him. And that's why I'm so suspicious of where we are today, Mr. Chairman, because I heard you numerous times say, come before the committee, come and testify before the world, come and tell everybody what happened. And he took you up on it, and he said yes. And I said, finally, we'll get to hear from Hunter Biden. We'll get to hear answers to all those questions Mr. Fallon posed. But then you wouldn't take yes for an answer. You said, no, we want to go to a back room and do it there, and then we will leak out appropriate details, which of course we have seen has allowed for radical distortions of people's testimony before this committee. You have not released the vast majority of transcribed interviews that have been in the back room so we can leak out specific details. So that's not right. That's why we have questions about it. But I'm with Ms. Mace. Let's bring them all in. Let's bring in all the Republicans who still haven't testified about what they know about what happened on January 6th, and let's bring Hunter Biden in. Let's do that all together. I'd be for that. And thank you for yielding, Ms. Tlaib, and I yield back.
Chair recognizes Mr. Langworthy for 5 minutes.
I will yield the balance of my time to my ranking member.
Ms. Brown, thank you so much. You started off by saying something pretty profound, which is we are here instead of doing the business of the American people because the Republicans have offered us no positive agenda in their year in office. We know we've wasted countless weeks in them just trying to pick a speaker. And we've wasted countless weeks with their inertia and their do-nothing policies. But Ms. Brown, I don't know if you recall, I just don't want people having to take your word for it. I think numerous Republicans have gotten up on the floor of the House complaining about the fact that they have no agenda. I think our colleague Chip Roy from Texas said that the Republicans have not given him one thing, a single thing, I remember him saying, to campaign on. So I just want to ask you, when you're saying that they have no agenda, that's not a partisan point. You're getting that from Republicans, aren't you?
That is correct.
One of our colleagues said that there was Trump derangement syndrome, and of course, Trump derangement begins with Donald Trump himself. He thinks he has a legal right to assassinate U.S. citizens. He thinks he can grab women by their genitals, although that's not the word that he used. He said that if Joe Biden is reelected president, there will be World War II. He is obviously deranged and disoriented. But the real Trump derangement syndrome that I see is those people who cannot break from Donald Trump after he's proven himself to be completely and totally unworthy of your support. Because I'm looking at talented, gifted people on the other side of the aisle, the ones who have not left Congress in frustration or because they've broken with Donald Trump and clashed with him. But I'm still looking at people who have their wits about them, I think, but you're acting like cult members, like you're sleeping on the basement of a cult, listening to tapes all night, and I beg you to get over your Trump derangement syndrome. Thank you very much for yielding, Ms. Brown.
Chair recognizes Mr. Donalds from Florida for 5 minutes.
And one of the first things that the House did after the vote of an impeachment inquiry was to subpoena Hunter Biden to appear. Hunter Biden has evaded that subpoena. So flagrantly did he evade it that he decided to show up at the Senate side to give a press conference, and Eric Swalwell, a member of the House, helped him get that time on the Senate side to give a press conference. That's a flagrant violation of a congressional subpoena. Secondarily, he has the gall to show up here when we're actually discussing contempt. And he didn't stay. He was sitting right over there. He's not here now. He said he wants to talk. He could have stayed through the whole proceeding. He chose to leave. That's his business. But he was subpoenaed to come here. Back in December, he chose not to of his own volition. He's in violation of that subpoena, a subpoena that was executed with the signature of the clerk of the House of Representatives. That is the document that is binding. That's what we work off of. I want the minority to understand one very important distinction between Presidents Biden and President Trump. President Trump has an international real estate portfolio that he has amassed over decades. I'm quite sure if you go back through all of the hotel receipts before he was president of the United States, that you had foreign dignitaries staying at Trump hotels all across the world.
Will the gentleman yield?
I'm not going to yield, Mr. Raskin. I'm making a point. Because they're actually very nice hotels. They look good. People like staying there. President Trump was not running the Trump Organization when he was president of the United States. To my recollection, Eric Trump, the president's son, was actually running the Trump Organization when President Trump was president of the United States. So if he had a portfolio of hotels and people choose, through Expedia, through Kayak, through Hotels.com, if they choose to go and stay there, how is that the president being in violation of what the emoluments clause? That's what you're citing? Stop. Ladies and gentlemen, America, this is ridiculous. The Biden family has no business. They've never had a business except for politics.
I need to correct the record because of several false statements made about the Foreign Emoluments Clause, Article 1, Section 9, Clause 8, although I do appreciate the gentleman from Florida's attempt to at least engage on the matter of substance that was raised so powerfully by Ms. Crockett. Now let's start with this. Article 1, Section 9, Clause 8 says that neither the president nor any member of Congress can receive a present, an emolument, which means a payment, an office or a title from a prince, a king, a foreign government, quote, Mr. Donald, of any kind whatever, without going to Congress first and obtaining the consent of Congress. There's no hotel exception, Mr. Donald, to the Foreign Emoluments Clause. There's no international real estate syndicate exception to the Foreign Emoluments Clause, Mr. Donald. And also, I will take you up on your challenge to see whether the Trump Hotel in Washington, the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas, the Trump Hotel on Fifth Avenue, the Trump Hotel at UN Plaza, the four of the more than 500 businesses that we got documentation for, whether they actually had the same level of business coming from Saudi Arabia, the communist bureaucrats of China, who were the leading spender, as you know, if you've read our report, the United Arab Emirates, Indonesia, India, Egypt, and so on. We will make that comparison about what was done before if you get the chairman to call off the ban on further documents coming from Mazars. So
have you ever stayed at a Trump hotel, Mr. Raskin?
Excuse no, and I never would stay at a Trump hotel. I've got too much self-respect and
concern
for
hotels.
Hygiene. So, but in any event, Mr. Donald, you're totally wrong about what the Foreign Emoluments Clause stands for. Abraham Lincoln was given 2 elephant tusks by the king of Siam during the Civil War, and he liked them very much. He wanted to keep them, but he went to Congress which is what every other president did before and every president did since, right up until Donald Trump. And he asked whether he could keep the tusks. And Congress, though they loved Honest Abe, said, no, you can't keep them. I mean, John F. Kennedy was offered citizenship by the people of Ireland because they loved him so much, and he refused to take it, saying that even though it didn't violate the letter of the Emoluments Clause, it violated the spirit of the Emoluments Clause. And Donald Trump converted the presidency into an instrument for self-enrichment. He raked in millions of dollars from the most corrupt governments on earth, who came in with specific favors that we document in our report that they got from Donald Trump.